live now. All right, guys. Today's topic is the heart of great relationships start with open communication. Truth be told, when youth and young adults are focused on how to truly transition to the real world, the number one thing that's holding them back is the art of communication. They look to their role models within their organizations, within schools, within their homes. And to be honest, relationships don't go well because they're toxic. And because they're toxic, it becomes a rippling effect. And when it becomes a rippling effect, those youth to young adults that are going into the real world, they continue to repeat what they've been taught. But that's not helping anyone. Communication today cannot be done by themselves. It needs to be able to be identified with more than one person. And when you're thinking about the art of communication is going to be different depending on levels, from frontline to middle management to upper management to senior level management, from mentors to guardians to parents. And our youth to young adults, as they're transitioning into the real world today, are upside down. And then the lack of communication that our youth are involved in then goes into the employment sector. And when youth go into the employment sector, they don't know how to communicate with bosses. They don't know how to communicate with coworkers. They don't know how to communicate with HR. They don't know how to communicate on projects. They don't know how to communicate in teams. And when they don't have that art of communication, then they typically go inward. And when they go inward and not communicating, all hell breaks loose. So today I want to discuss 5 hacks on the heart of great relationships with open communication. My name is Dr. Takima Dorsey, and I'm the author of over 100 publications and the CEO and the founder of DTD Sports Leadership Academy. And communication is wholeheartedly a part of this discussion as I talk about youth to young adult transition, because to me, communication is simply advocacy. And the advocacy can never be enough. And we only advocate in 1 to 2 ways in life. That's speaking and or writing. And our youth to young adults today don't know how to advocate for themselves. Before I go into the 5 tips or the 5 hacks that I just want to share in this short broadcast, I had a discussion with Delegate Jackson this morning off the strength of a discussion I had with Delegate Ebersol over a week ago. A bill that I'm trying to get into legislation is dealing with special needs youth as they are transitioning into the real world via their standardized test scores. Youth today that have 504s and IEPs, once they have approved accommodations through College Board, should be able to sit for their SATs and APs. In my discussion last week, as I was trying to garner support by Delegate Ebersol and a follow-up with Delegate Jackson this morning, one of the things that Delegate Ebersol mentioned was youth with special needs being able to advocate for themselves in terms of being able to talk to College Board, to talk to the local community college testing centers, being able to talk to their parents. And that sounds great in theory, but it's absolutely upside down. And why is that upside down? Because students with special needs or disabilities, not that they can't advocate, but they're not being taught to advocate. And they're not being able to taught advocacy on the multiple levels involved in terms of them being able to get accommodations on a College Board level. That means they have to advocate with themselves within their school buildings. They have to advocate for themselves with their educational leadership within a school, the superintendent, their parents, the local community college, and College Board. Come on, guys. That's putting a lot of expectations on our youth in this scenario when they really don't even advocate for themselves or don't know how to precisely as it relates to their own educational endeavors. So when we're talking about communicating, it's not just one level. It's not just one way to skin a cat. But the heart of great relationships start with open communication. And as I'm talking in terms of youth to young adult transitions, relationships and communications are important. So if you're following me on Instagram today, what's up, people? If you're following me in my private Facebook group, what's up to those individuals? And it's 5 tips that I want to be able to share. And first and foremost is starting with relationships. Relationships today, and parents don't get upset, guardians don't get upset, coaches don't get upset, but we're just going to hit the nail on the hammer. And a lot of relationships today tip number 1 focuses on the relationships. And unfortunately, relationships today are toxic. A lot of parents today don't have great relationships with their youth. They're uncertain. Wait a minute, I'm having technical difficulty right now. Scroll, not at the bottom. Save. Hold on, people. See, if I wasn't trying to have multiple things going on today, I wouldn't be having this problem. All right, there we go. So tip number 1 today is all about relationships. So if you're following me on Facebook, you can see this actual live. If you're on Instagram today, you're just listening. But let's talk about open communications and relationship. And I want to talk about the parent-child relationship right now. Students today have just ended their spring semester. They're now in the summer. They're going through a huge opportunity of transition. And they're going from structure to unstructured. And a lot of youth today to young adults are looking for people that can help get them on their feet. But if there's no portal of communication, and if parents are constantly saying, do this, do that, and do the other, and the kids really want to do what they're being asked to do but don't know how, that's a break in communication. And instead of strengthening a relationship with the parent, it's destroying a relationship, and the student is stuck in the middle. Youth today need structure, but they don't need people to just tell them how to do it. They want to be shown how to do it. And with one of a potential client that I spoke with last week, he just graduated from a very prominent Catholic school, also turned 18, graduated, so successful, but he's stuck. The one thing he said to me, he said, Dr. Dorsey, he said, I am afraid that now that I'm 18, I'm going to make decisions that are not in my best interest. And that made sense because he's going away to Georgia in the fall, and he's going to be all by himself. He doesn't have any support around him. And he's concerned that although he can communicate with his teachers and maybe his professor, he's not quite sure how to communicate with other people that's a part of his support network, that he now have to develop those relationships outside of his comfort zone. And so when we have our students at home, helping them to understand how to build the relationships through communication is direly important. Now, there is no one conversation or there's no one off when we're teaching these relationship tactics, but it has to start, or at least it should start within a home. If it's not within a home, but we know that our youth are active in programs, whether it's a youth-centered, a youth-led, a summer program, a program, that they're interested in starting, then how do we teach them how to communicate differently through relationship building? Whether it's advocating for what they're passionate about, or even learn how to communicate through writing. So one of the first tip in dealing or handling building open communications for improvement is through relationship building. The second one, tip-wise, that I wanted to share is trust. A lot of our youth to young adults today do not trust people that are around them. They don't trust you for whatever the reason may be. But so how do we build that trust so that they would not only want to have the conversation with us, but being able to listen to us? As an educator of over 30 years, the one thing that I learned early on, right out of my master's program, going into the school system, is I was told that youth can see fake individuals. They can smell it, they can hear it, they can sense it, and they won't tell you that they think you're fake, but they will go tell others. And when you think that what you are saying or how you're acting is not honest, they're not going to trust you. But here's the problem with that. Our youth to young adults, as they're transitioning into the real world, our youth to young adults, as they're transitioning from elementary to middle to high, high to college, college into the real world, they need someone they can trust, not just in the sense of what they're being taught, but also someone that they can talk to. Typically, that's a parent, but we also know that not every youth to young adult has a parent in their in their home. It might be a guardian, it might be a coach, but they want to be able to know that whatever they say to you is going to stay with you. So that communication and them reaching out and being vulnerable and humble is something that they absolutely need in an adult. And the number one thing that our youth don't want to feel is if, one, they can't trust the person that they're speaking with, and they're not going to listen to a person that really has something that they need to hear. So again, the heart of great relationships start with open communication. One is going to be that relationship. Two is going to be that trust. And then the next hack is authenticity, which really goes back into who the person is that is creating a conversation is also receiving it. This is probably the hardest because this is more of an internal thing when we're talking about communication versus an external one. If authenticity really comes back to the character of the person who's communicating, as opposed to the person who's was on the receiving end. If I'm having a conversation with my daughter or someone that's in my program, and I know that I'm BSing my way through the discussion, they're going to be able to pick it up. But most importantly, I'm not doing a detriment to them. I'm doing a detriment to myself. So when we're having communication with people, whether it's something that we've done wrong, something that we desire, if it's just a position on to agree to disagree, a suggestion to make sure that you're building open communication is to be authentic, be honest. A few years ago, I was had a discussion with one of my clients, and he was really big on truth telling. And, I witnessed him having a discussion with someone, and he was really entrenched in the conversation. He was really passionate about it. It was really surrounding a topic that was important to him. And he walked away and his face dropped. And I couldn't understand why his face would drop after having such a successful discussion where it appeared that he got a lot out of it. And he said to me, he was like, that didn't go well. And I said, well, what made it not go well? And what he shared to me was that the person wasn't honest. They were BSing their way through it. And it wasn't so much about the message that was lost. He lost trust in the person. And when a person loses trust in what they think that you have to say, especially our youth and young adults today, they'll never look at you differently. And you really could be a person or even a parent that has a lot to offer. And why am I focusing on youth to young adults right now? Because our youth to young adults are going into the real world. They're going into the real world, and at the age of 18, even still under their parents' roof, they're going to be required to talk, navigate, manage, build relationships, and have all the expectations of people that are considered adults, because that's what they are in today's time, adults. And if they're not surrounded and being taught beyond the surface, the substance of how important open communication is and what that looks like, then they'll go into the real world and they will damage who they are and their reputation even before they get started. They'll show up on a job and immediately, hopefully they get the job. They'll go out into the real world in these discussions and in these job fields, and they're not going to be successful because if they are faulty on an application or not truthful in an interview or overinflate their resume and then articulate it as if it's theirs, but it's not, it's going to be damaging. Not knocking the senator from New York that did just that, but right now that are facing criminal charges, he took on a whole entire profile that was not his. And even throughout the process, through his campaign, his people supported him, people got behind them, people threw money at him. And even when it came out just before he was sworn into Congress, he would not step down and he stayed with the lie. And he wasn't being authentic as to who he was. And now, less than 6 months later, he's in a whole heap of trouble. What is that showing our youth and young adults today? That's showing that it's okay to lie. And it's not okay to lie when we're trying to prepare our youth to young adults to go into the real world and to be the best version of themselves and improve. And so the heart of great relationships starts with open communication. We develop that one through relationships on all levels, establishing trust, especially at home, being authentic to who we are, and most importantly, a safe space. One of the roles I serve is as the youth advisor of the local town, the NAACP Randallstown Youth Council. And our executive youth leadership team had the opportunity during the month of May and June to meet with several council people throughout Baltimore County, including the outgoing superintendent. One of their solutions was to come up with a summit that is focused on allowing youth throughout the county to voice their concerns. And so when one of the Councilman Jones, asked them about parents being in a room, because obviously you never want to isolate parents when youth are involved, Councilman Jones asked them, well, what about the parents? And immediately the executive youth leaders that were holding a meeting saying it's great for the parents to be there, but they can't be in a meeting without youth. And the reason why? Safe space. A lot of our youth to young adults today don't feel that they have a safe space. And a safe space, according to our executive youth leaders, allow youth to have a voice without feeling like they're going to be shamed. They're talking negative about a topic that their parents don't agree with, or just being openly vocal. And so our youth today, as we're talking about the heart of great relationships, and starting with open communication, youth today need a safe space. They need a space that they can voice what's on their minds through advocacy or whatever the case might be without feeling judged. If you are a parent of a youth to young adult, whether it's elementary, middle, high, college, or even those that are in the real world, you got to carve out a place or time or way that your youth voices can be heard. To them, that's one, they're practicing advocacy. Two, and they can just get off their chest what is most important to them. So they need a safe space. And for those youth to young adults that are not vocal, find a way for them to write it down, whether it's in a journal, whether it's on a piece of paper, whether it's a carve out time one day a week or at the dinner table. And there's not going to be a backlash. That was the most important thing that I heard our executive youth leaders talk about in that safe space, is that it's a space that they can just freely talk without feeling as if they're going to be chastised. That's very important as we're teaching our young adults today to practice great communication. And then my last tip, as we're talking about the heart of great relationships with open communication. First, we talked about relationships. Then we talk about establishing that trust. And remember, I'm focusing on youth to young adults, but it could be currently in your work setting. It could be currently on your board of education, on your executive board. It could be with your partners. But those are adults to me. Our youth to young adults today, as they're transitioning to the next level and into the real world, need to really be able to understand what these communication pieces and variables look like, because they're going to be expected to perform. So relationship building is so important on every level. Building trust in those relationships. If something is being shared, or, someone has something to say, Show up, be active, be authentic when you're communicating with others. Create that safe space. And then last but not least, my tip, which is number 5, if you're following, is that communication and relationships is a job. It is a job, just like you get up and go to the gym, you're trying to lose weight, you're trying to get that honey to no longer be a booty call, but be your boo-boo, or you're trying to put a ring on it. It is a job, and it is a job that none of us can master, but all of us have to continue to work on it. And as I'm focusing on our youth to young adults, teaching them or them seeing adults around them work on communication is what they're going to model. And not only will they model it, they'll be able to understand what went well and what didn't go well. And I'll be the first one to say, as a parent of 4, that is now 25, 18, 17, and 15, when I first started with my oldest son 25 years ago, I was learning something new. I mean, there was this book out, I think, by Dr. Spock. Unfortunately, it was not meant for Black people, because I read that book and threw it away. And I began to learn as I was teaching him. But in retrospect, he was teaching me. And then 7 years later, when my daughter came, because my first child was a son, it was like learning communication all over again. And then along the way, I got married. Then I had another child, and then another child. I mean, when we talk about all hell broke loose, that's how I felt. And so how I communicated with my first child was different, in how I had to communicate with my second child. One, because there were gender differences, there were age differences, there were developmental differences, there were different needs, there were different expectations. The only thing that was concretely the same was education, God, and family. Everything else, it was a work in progress. You know, then I had my son's father, then my husband. And so communication for me over the lifespan of my 4 children all varied, and it still varies. And so this communication thing, as we're talking about the heart of great relationships, starting with open communication, it is a job. It is not a one best approach to making it happen. And so what I learned from my oldest son in communication and needs and expectation and what he's looking for and what he was advocating for, which I didn't understand, which were industry trends and things like that, I can now relate to my youngest son, right? Because although they're 11 years apart, I can relate from a gender standpoint, which I couldn't at first. And then with my 2 daughters stuck in the middle, what I learned from my oldest daughter, I started learning and sharing with my younger daughter, mainly because of the gender similarities. But even communication with all 4 of them were all different. And so as a parent, you know, I had to learn to listen more. I had to learn to be a little more reflective, still have standards, still have expectations, but each of their way of communicating with me based off their needs and the environment they were in, their cultural differences, their bias, their prejudices were all new for me. And as a parent, I could not allow my ignorance to drop the communication ball. I had to put my big girl panties on, and they weren't that big, but they're big enough now. And I had to find a way to relate to where they are. I remember even going back and stopping my consulting to go into the school system to substitute, right? Because the difference between my oldest son and my oldest daughter was a 7-year gap. So my oldest son was born in 97. Technology came about in 2000. But my last 3 kids were all born in the technology age. So even though I'm an educator, I kind of felt like I was missing something. So even going back into the school system as a substitute, I started learning and hearing and digesting different ways that kids were communicating with one another. I mean, even all the way down to apps that I felt was dumb. An emoji, for example, if you like someone, you don't tell them you like them, you give them a like. or a heart or a broken heart. And I'm like, I remember asking my daughter, how do you know if somebody, if the like is true? Oh, because they follow you and they like you. Well, when do y'all talk? We don't. What? But that was their way of communicating. So this communication thing is really a job. And well, I'm giving examples of inside the school system in a younger age. My kids now have to go out into the real world. And every person that they communicate with will judge them based off what they say, how they look, how they act, how they not act, how they speak, how they don't speak, not just problems, but also solutions. And knowing that the real world is coming for them, then my job as a parent, not just as an educator or a consultant or a business owner, is to help them practice that communication within my house. And sometimes I just want to turn down the volume. Sometimes I want to turn up the volume. Sometimes I just want to mute them. But it's their safe space to have conversations, even when they're arguing within themselves. And then my younger two, who actually are youth leaders in their community, civic engagement, all of that, they're having these conversations with these politicians and Board of Education and things like that, because it's teaching them how to have discussions on a different level, right? Everyone will, God willing, will make it to age 18. And it's not what they say, it's how they say it, it's how they present themselves, and all of the things that we talked about in these 5 hacks. But most importantly, parents at home, whether you have a newborn, you're having children, your kid is in elementary, they're in middle, they're high school, even in college, take the time to have conversations and let them know that you are a person that they can turn to, even when it's not a favorable topic. And not just within a home, allow them, if you are a business owner, if you are a person that is a part of an organization, if you are a person that is a business owner and part of the organization, bring your own kids to the meetings, because what they're going to see, good, bad, or indifferent, is how adults communicate. Because those communications at one point or another, they will be a part of. And when they can see how adults communicate, they're going to start reflecting and see themselves in that position. And then afterwards, it's called a debrief. Debrief, what went well, what didn't go well, what did you glean from it, how did that relate to you, what were topics that are important to you. These are all great strategies that really start within a home, because you want to know why. And I don't believe in saying everything about what happens with the kid is a parent's fault, because it's not. Cultural, environmental, peers all play into their home bringing. However, communication should start at home. It should be elevated at home. It should be practiced and nurtured at home. And it doesn't mean that they're going to go out into the real world and get it right, but at least they know that their voices matter. And so, again, you can change the noun youth to young adult to HR, your husband, your wife, your boo-boo or boo-boos, or whoever. But the heart of great relationships start with open communication. Relationships, 2, trust, 3, authenticity, 4, a safe space, and 5, it's literally a job. Well, that's it for me today. I'm starting, it's not even a series, but each day, every day, I'm having a podcast released as well as a podcast show release. You can follow me on YouTube. You can follow me on my Urban on Buzzsprout or Apple or Google, or just look up my podcast. If you're looking for ways, if you are a parent that you're looking for ways to open up that line of communication or learn more strategies, if you are a program director or of a youth-led or youth-centered organization, and you're looking for ways to increase communication within your staff or your organization or even your programming, or if you're just looking for communication in general as a person, you can reach me at 443-431-8943, or you can reach out to our assistant at info@DTDenterprises.com or info@Dr. Tekema, that's TEKEMIA, Dorsey, DORSEY.com. Well, that's for me. It's for me today. The heart of great relationships start with open communication. Remember, it is not something that you're going to be able to master right then and there, but it is something that needs to be utilized, elevated, nurtured, and worked on day in and day out, because every day on earth is a day for us to make a difference. But if we're not practicing great communication skills, we're in trouble, and so are the people God has placed in front of you to make a difference. And so I hope that today's podcast as well as show has been helpful. You can go to YouTube in about 24 hours and download this episode, or you can go to my website and download the podcast. Remember, there is no one way to skin a cat, and there is no one way to effectively communicate. But each and every day that we wake up, it is a day to make a difference, and great communication starts with us. My name is Dr. Takima Dorsey. Have a great day. Look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow. And for my Instagram peeps, I cannot see your comments. I will go back and take a look at them. For my Facebook peeps, that's in my private group, The Art of Preparatory Program Success. I look forward to your comments. If you have any questions, please drop them below. I'll be sure to get back out. I'll be sure to follow up with you. And until then, have a great day. Share this with anyone in your network that's looking to improve their relationships. But especially for our youth and young adults today, because they need someone advocating for them in ways that they need assistance. And I'm your girl. I run a comprehensive preparatory program called DTD Sports Leadership Academy. And it's open to youth ages 9 to 24. So 9 to 18, sorry. So we'll take college students, but that's a little different. But if you need an assistance, look forward to working with you. And until then, have a great day. Peace out, people.